The tech giant Huawei will now be able to build the 5G network in Britain. Just announced today, this sends up some red flags for the U.S. government, which has put pressure on the Brits to refuse to work with the tech vendor because of long-standing security concerns. Yesterday, I spoke with Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin. He's always had serious concerns about Huawei. Let's take a listen to that. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Congressman, give us a little bit of your reaction to this news. You've been an outspoken advocate against Huawei, and about the UK's decision in particular. They're weighing, and it seems quite seriously, in order to snub the United States' direct request in order to not allow Huawei to their domestic market.
Well, it is very concerning. I hope that Prime Minister Johnson does not allow this to go forward. It's my view, and I think the view of most of the national security establishment in D.C., really across the country here, and among some of our closest allies like Australia, which has led the way, that if you allow Huawei and ZTE on your networks, you're effectively allowing the Chinese Communist Party on your networks. And it gets to the issue of where how sovereign do you want to be? And at a time when the UK has clawed back some sovereignty from Brussels, to then surrender it to Beijing would be entirely counterproductive.
Yeah, it does seem very out of step with their Brexit move. So I've heard the comparison, I think, from the former Australian Prime Minister Turnbull, that this is like allowing the KGB to build the cellular network in the 1970s. Do you think that that's an accurate comparison?
I do. The Deputy National Security Advisor, Matt Pottinger, was at a forum this weekend in which he said, imagine Ronald Reagan and Maggie Thatcher having a conversation in the 80s and saying, you know, we're going to let the FSB build our networks because they offer a really cheap product. And the price is really the issue here. And it's not just with the UK, it's across Europe and certainly in African countries that do want cheap internet and maybe don't have as much counterintelligence concerns. Huawei is able to undercut their competitors, Nokia, Ericsson, by 30 to 50% because they receive massive state subsidies from the Chinese Communist Party. And so it's not enough just to play the defensive game of saying, don't allow Huawei onto your networks. We, as the free world, do need to come together with our allies and figure out how can we offer a better, integrated, and ultimately cheaper solution for countries that may be on the fence right now.
Mm-hmm. So one counter that I've heard to this, or one response I've heard to this, is that if the UK does decide to go down this route, is that they put into jeopardy their Five Eyes arrangement on intelligence. For the viewers that don't know, that's basically a special arrangement we have with 5 of our closest allies on intelligence sharing. Do you think that that would be an appropriate measure to take if they go down this route?
Well, I think it's certainly something we'll have to re-examine. In other words, if we don't accept this idea that you can segregate the periphery from the core of your network, it calls into question all of the information that we're sharing with the UK and the rest of our Five Eyes partners. Certainly, we're united with another Five Eyes partner, Australia, on this issue. And so I do think it will force legislators and members of the executive branch to fundamentally re-examine our intelligence sharing partnership with the UK, and that would be incredibly regrettable because that relationship has paid dividends in recent years. I can tell you as a former member of the intelligence community, when I worked in the Ops Center, the National Counterterrorism Center, every night we would call our British counterparts, and so I really hope we don't get to that point. And it's not just Five Eyes that would be in danger. I think it would seriously put in danger the prospect of a post-Brexit US-UK gold standard trade agreement, and so this is a very important decision.
Right. So, Congressman, I mean, based on your knowledge, you're very involved in this. How do you think that the president is going to go forward? Do you think that there's going to be sanctions and other economic measures on the table in terms of these negotiations?
Well, I know that at the highest levels of the foreign policy establishment, including Secretary Pompeo and others, we are sending the signal. Secretary Mnuchin, I believe, was in the UK this weekend, that please do not go down this road. We want to work with you. We understand the concerns on price, but we really don't want to do anything to jeopardize this partnership. So I think that sends a strong signal. But in addition to that, my hope is that we actually start to impose some maximum economic pressure on Huawei and ZTE. We've taken some measures, but we keep granting exceptions for U.S. companies to do business with these companies. I think it's far past time for us to not grant those exceptions and potentially consider putting Huawei on a Treasury special designated national list, which really cut off their access to the U.S. banking system.
Well, that sounds smart to me. Thank you so much, Congressman. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Good to see you, sir. We'll have more Rising for you right after this.